Free will is an illusion. There is no such thing. It's an illusion. It's a necessary illusion, by the way. You know, if you tried to operate as if you don't have free will, you couldn't do it. How are you going to do it? Right? So it's a necessary illusion. It has to be the case that you think that you can do things, and that thought that you can do things is a function of the idea that you're a separate self. Once you take it that you're a separate self, free will comes into play automatically. You know, if I'm separate from the world, then what I'm doing, right? If I'm not separate from the world, and if non-duality is the truth, then what I'm doing, I am not doing. What I'm doing is being done through me, not by me. That's the will of God. Thy will be done, where that's cause and effect. It's a very, very powerful concept. It's a very, very powerful experience. If you apply it to your life, you can begin to see the power of it, because what it means, Ramesh Balsekar is the best teacher on the predestination topic. He really breaks it down nicely and talks about the fact that if you really look at it closely, you can see that it offers you a tremendous amount of freedom, and it offers you the ability to relax. Because if it's true that everything is predetermined, then it means that you never did anything to anybody, and nobody ever did anything to you, and nobody could do anything to you, and you could never do anything to anybody. If you really consider that, that takes a lot of bullshit away. You know, that takes a lot of unnecessary suffering away, a lot of guilt, a lot of concern away. The key, though, is to understand that doesn't mean you're not responsible for what happens. Somebody can commit a murder, and according to the predetermined reality, they never get caught. That was the way that was supposed to go. Somebody could not commit a murder and be arrested and tried for murder and put in prison. That was the way that was supposed to go. Right? So this whole business of everything being predetermined, if it is in fact the truth, it's expressing a completely different version of reality. Anything that you're proud of, you didn't do. You can let that go. Just like anything that you're not proud of, you didn't do, and you can let that go. And then if you're living with an awareness of this as in real time, if you're living with an awareness of this moment to moment, right? Can you see the difference that would make? Can you imagine the difference that would make? In terms of your being concerned, you know, about getting it right, about doing the right thing, about not making mistakes. But it doesn't get you off the hook. You can't get arrested for something and then tell the police, I had nothing to do with it. It was predetermined. You know, that doesn't work. It doesn't work that way, and it has to not work that way, because in a society we have to have a way of controlling behavior, as if we're really controlling behavior. But we have to have a way, at least, to believe we're controlling behavior. By putting people in prison when they do things that are destructive or damaging or threatening to other people. Having worked in the prison system for 32 years, the idea that everything is predetermined is a very valuable understanding for somebody in prison. You know, it can actually give them their life back. To come to the realization and the understanding that they didn't do it. And while it may be true that they didn't do it, so you don't have to suffer the guilt and so forth, you do have to deal with the responsibility for it. Even if you didn't do it, it did happen and you were there. And you're going to be considered the one who did it by society. One of the things about these teachings about Buddhism, or really any of the Eastern teachings, Taoism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Zen, Sufism, is that, and particularly true about Zen, is that you could say that these teachings are reality teachings. Reality teachings. Because the biggest problem with living in a dream, the biggest problem with believing that you are the physical body and that you're a separate self, right, is that gives you an unreal world to live in. That's an unreal world. The thought world is an unreal world. The emotional thought and the emotions and the thought world is an unreal world that's happening like a dream. And so when you start to practice meditation and you learn about these teachings, you get access to reality. You begin to discover that there is a way to be connected to what's actually happening instead of just what you think about it or how it affects your conditioning or what feelings get triggered about it. It is actually possible, as they used to say back in the 60s, to be here now. It's actually possible to be here now. And according to Paul Hederman, he makes a good point when he says, while it is possible to be here now, in order for you to experience that truth, you have to accept the fact that you can't possibly be anywhere else. You know, a lot of people think, oh, be here now. That means I'm not here now, so I have to practice something to be here now. But you can't not be here now. That's the only possibility, you know. So when you're practicing being here now, all you're doing is paying attention to the truth. That's all. You didn't change anything. You know, when you wake up, when you experience what's available here as a possibility, and you wake up, meaning that you recognize the truth, you recognize yourself as the awareness, right? You recognize reality as what it is. When that happens, nothing happens. This is very, very important to understand, especially if you're not yet on the side of the equation where you've experienced and recognized your true nature as awareness. Especially if you're not there yet, it's very important to understand that until you get there, you're still in the dream. Until you get there, your attempts to practice meditation and your attempts to apply the teachings can't possibly work because you have not yet come into being what you are. You have not yet started to experience the truth about yourself. So you're still dreaming, and you're still using thinking to function, and you're still trying. You're still trying to get something. You're still trying to experience something that you think is possible through the practice of meditation. And as long as that's the case, you're not meditating. As long as that's the case, you're making the identity of the personality stronger because you're practicing being the personality. This is why I say, and this is why they teach in the Zen tradition, that in the beginning you have to understand that there will be a time, if you're committed to these practices and these teachings, there will be a time when you wake up. It's inevitable because there are only two possibilities, sleeping and being awake. Right? So if you're not awake, the only place you can go from there is to wake up, right? So one of the ways to talk about this that is said in the traditions is your head is already in the tiger's mouth. Your head is already in the tiger's mouth. What does that mean? It means it's not as if you can do anything other than wake up. It's already set up that way. Everybody will wake up in time. Everybody will wake up. There is no other place to go. Everybody that's suffering is in the process of waking up. They're just in the suffering part. And if the suffering gets bad enough and you get desperate enough, right, then you'll be listening for anything that might be helping you to escape the suffering, right? And because you're listening like that, when you come across these teachings, right, you make yourself available. And if you make yourself available to these teachings and you hear the Dharma, you hear the truth, right, then you could look at yourself as being chosen to be among those who can wake up in this life. Right? Because until you hear the truth, until somebody hears the truth, not only hears the truth, but listens to it, Let those who have ears hear. The truth can be said to you, but you may not have a listening for it. You may interpret it. You've seen people come into this class, right, and hear this talk, right? And it's getting interpreted by their mind. They don't have a lot of experience with this, so it's getting interpreted by their mind, right? So they're hearing it, but they don't have a listening for it. So it's getting interpreted by their mind and it's being turned into something else. You know, it's being turned into whatever it's being turned into. This is a cult, or, you know, this doesn't make any sense to me, or this doesn't seem like a good solution to my problems. If you start to experience being awake, right, you'll be able to speak directly from your experience. You'll be able to speak directly from the experience. We've talked about this before. I have no idea what I'm going to say here. I'm as interested in you as you are.
Right, but it has to be formulated into language.
It has to be formulated into language, but that can happen without there being any awareness of it. The brain does that all the time. You know, it can happen without there being any awareness. There's a lot of times when I'll go home from the class and I'm editing the video to put up on YouTube, and I'm listening to it, I'm saying, this is good. This is good, you know, because when I'm here speaking, I'm speaking it, but I'm not on the listening end, right? But when I'm editing it, I'm on the listening side of it, right? When I'm on the listening side of it and I hear it, I say, okay, yeah, that's pointing at it, that's pointing at the truth and so forth. But I didn't formulate it. You know, it's just the way these teachings work, whether it's me or anybody that's doing this, that has been around and has enough practice, right? The way that occurs for you is you have an intention, and you understand that if you show up with that intention and you're present, you know, you're there, and you're there as what you actually are, that will speak. That'll speak. As you go through these practices, at some point you'll get to a place in these practices where you'll find yourself in situations with people where you don't take time to process anything, or you don't take time to figure out what to say. It just comes out like a response. You know, it comes out like a response. Not a reaction, but it comes out like a response, you know, in terms of because you're the being that you are at that time, right, is seeing things compassionately and seeing things realistically and seeing things in a kind context, because your nature is unconditional love. And so if that's the case, when things happen, you begin to spontaneously respond from there. Not all the time, you know, because this whole process is a gradual process for most of us, right? So that happens, right? But then there may be something else that happens that triggers you a different way, right? And because it triggered you a different way and that reaction is too strong to stay awake, right? Then the reaction speaks. But if you're involved in these practices and teachings long enough, you can start to tell the difference. You can start to experience the difference. You know when you're in a reactive state. You know when you're acting out thinking and emotions, and you know when that's not realistic, because the feedback you get indicates that it's not realistic. You know, if your behavior results in somebody else being upset or hurt or reacting back to you, then obviously you weren't in contact with your true nature at the time that you were speaking. That will happen. The place to practice so you can get good at responding is respond to your own internal process. And where you practice responding is responding to your mind, right? If you get good enough in responding to your mind, which is like the minds of other people, then you'll be able to be good in responding to other people's minds without getting into trouble. But first you have to be able to respond to your own mind. It's very, very important to remember, one of the most critical aspects of the teachings is to practice and constantly remind yourself and be aware of the fact that what's happening that's causing you to be upset and causing you to suffer and causing you to be troubled is not happening in the world, it's happening in your mind. So instead of blaming somebody for upsetting you, right, look at your mind and see that upset was a function of your conditioning, and something similar to this happened in your past, and it happened again now, and it's close enough to what happened in the past. It's like a jukebox. It's close enough to what happened in the past, so it pushes the right combination of buttons, and the thoughts and the feelings come up from that past experience and play again. And they're playing again. But when they're playing again, you think that they're playing in relationship to what's happening, but they're not. They're playing in relationship to what happened in the past. And it runs the same thoughts, it runs the same emotions. And the reason it does that is because the mind is a survival machine, and the way it works is if I did that, if this happened or something close to this happened in the past, and I thought the thoughts I thought then, and I felt the feelings I felt then, and I acted out the behavior that I did then, and I'm still here, it must have worked. That's the system. It must have worked. And so it'll just keep replaying things from the past because it must have worked because you're still here, it didn't kill you. The problem with that is it works to survive you as a physical body and even a personality, but it doesn't produce any well-being at all. It has nothing to do with well-being. That's very important to understand. So you can get people that are crazy as can be that survive very well. You know, killing off a lot of other people in the process, right? Or you can get people who have done enough work and are able to deal with their own mental experiences, right? That they don't get that on other people, you know. They manage that, and they continue by managing that. Every time you manage that and see it for what it is, there's a space available for you to produce a response. Because you didn't act off of this. And if you don't act off of that, the reason you didn't act off of that is because you're awake enough to see what's really going on and recognize that what you're thinking about doing and how you feel about it and what you feel to do is not appropriate. It's not going to work. This is called reality. This is called waking up and seeing things as they are and practicing being awake, practicing being appropriate, practicing experiencing what you actually are. And along with that practice, the thing that you get to experience by doing that is a state of well-being. It's a state of well-being where you feel satisfied, content, and peaceful. You have nothing to be concerned about. You have nothing to worry about. That's your true nature. Your true nature as awareness has nothing to be concerned about, nothing to worry about, nothing to be afraid of, nothing to be angry about. It's watching the show. It's watching that which thinks it does have something to be worried about and be angry about and upset about. It's watching that play. But it's not identified with that. And the more that's the case where you're watching it play and you're not identified with that, it weakens the idea that you are the thinker of your thoughts. It weakens the idea that you are the physical body. It weakens the idea that you are your conditioning. And the more that is weakened, the more well-being you experience. And the more that is weakening, the more effective you are in the actions you take in your life, because the actions you take in your life are consistent with the truth and consistent with the source. And the source, when you're experiencing your true nature, you and the source are the same thing. That's why we say you are God. That's not meant to be blasphemous. That's not meant to, that's anybody who understands the truth knows that's just a matter of fact. And maybe what you have to do is take another look at your beliefs about God. Maybe that's where the problem is. Not in the reality of the situation, but it's the reality of the situation. In non-duality, you have to be God, because in non-duality, there isn't two. There's not you and God. In non-duality, there's just one. There is not two. And if there's just one, you have to be God. You have to be God, because you are everything. You're the universe. Somebody wrote a comment on one of the YouTube videos today that I was reading, and it was actually interesting because he was talking about the Heart Sutra. The Heart Sutra says, form is emptiness and emptiness is form. And the comment he made was actually useful because he was saying people hear that and they think there's two things, emptiness and form, right? But that's duality. So it's not two things. What that means is the emptiness is the form and the form is the emptiness, right? So we only are familiar with the form side of the equation, right? So we're dealing with the form all the time, right? But this form that we're dealing with is empty. It literally is the awareness that is manifesting as a form, but it's still the awareness. It's still the awareness. And when the form dies, right, because the form is awareness and the awareness is the form, when the form dies, the awareness is still there. That's the teaching. That's the teaching. If you can wake up to your true nature as the awareness and the form, right? Because your true nature is that you are. See, we always talk about your true nature as the awareness as if it's not the form. Why? Because you've been stuck in the form. All you thought you were and all you thought was true was the form. So we say, no, you're the awareness and the awareness is empty. The awareness is like space, it's empty. But then to complete the project, you have to go back again and say, okay, now that you got that you are the awareness and the awareness is empty, now we have to go back to the original statement and say, and you are the form too. That's why in the beginning we say you're not the personality, right? This is what Rupert Spivak calls concessions, right? We build on the teaching. You're stuck believing you are the personality. So we'll say you're not the personality and we'll present you with evidence that indicates that that's the case. And as soon as you're comfortable with experiencing that you're not the personality, we take it to the next step and say you are the personality. And people might say that's a contradiction, but it's not a contradiction because the personality is the form, the awareness is the emptiness, and they're both the same thing. So when you complete the process, that's why the Enso is what it is. That brush stroke circle that you see in Zen a lot of the time, that's why it's what it is. Because you start, you come around, you come right back to where you started from. You start as a person and you come back to being a person. But when you come back to being a person, you're not just a person now, you're the awareness and a person at the same time. Does that communicate at all? It's heavy as a concept, right? It's light as an experience, right? A lot of these things are heavy as concepts, right? But the concepts don't make a difference. So if you get the concepts, right? And I'm assuming when you say it's heavy, you mean not only that it's heavy, but it's useful and meaningful, yes? Yeah. So now when you get the concept, the idea in getting the concept is that will stimulate and motivate you to experience what the concept is pointing at. And if you experience what the concept is pointing at, then you get the value of it. Then you get to experience the fulfillment of being able to be consistent with the way things are. Until then, the concepts have a certain value, but the value they have more than anything else is to motivate you to do the practices so the concept can become an experience. And when it becomes an experience, then you're experiencing the experience. Even if you don't remember the concept, it doesn't matter anymore because now you could write the book instead of just read the book. You see? If you wake up, you should be able to teach the teaching, right? Because you're seeing the teaching. You're experiencing the teaching. It doesn't mean that you'll be a master teacher, right? There's all kinds of teachers. Some are better than others, right? But you should be able to speak about this in a way that is realistic because you're actually experiencing it. Whereas if you only understand it conceptually, you can get yourself caught up in a lot of confusion, a lot of contradiction, and then you think you're stupid and crazy.